Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Strategic Planning Committee meeting. I am Carla Sylvester. We'll start with introductions, Chair of the committee and Vice President of the board. Ms. Oluni?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hannah Oluni, and I'm the student member of the Board of Education.
Ms. Harris?
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you.
Dr. Joftis?
Hey, everybody. Scott Joftis, District 3 representative. Good to be here.
Good. And we are joined by a number of our MCPS staff, and I'll have Ms. Sharon introduce them when it's time for them to present. I would like to start out by asking my fellow board members if you have any questions about the informational summary from October 22nd or any questions about the agenda for today. Okay, seeing none, let's get started. So if you recall, we completed and adopted our strategic plan. The full board adopted the plan, and now we are in the implementation phase. And one of the things that we wanted to do is to monitor key indicators of success across the different grade levels in early elementary and upper elementary, middle school, high school, those indicators that we know we have to be meeting in order for our students to be college, career, and community ready when the time comes. And it's a tricky game to present the data because the data has to be available to be presented, has to be collected and organized in a way. And so we are going to start today by looking at the key indicator of reading by grade 3. We will also look at the interventions that are getting us to success with that key indicator, and touching a little bit about our summer school program and its effectiveness for our students. And so with that introduction, I will pass it on to Ms. Sharon to get us started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Silvestri, and members of our Strategic Planning Committee. We're so excited to be here for our first conversation after the approval of our brand new strategic plan. I am joined today by Dr. Keisha Addison, the Director of the Office of Shared Accountability, Mr. Scott Murphy, Director of the Department of College and Career Readiness and District-Wide Programs, and Ms. Malika Brown, who's the Supervisor of Elementary English and Language Arts. We also have a number of other individuals who are in the virtual audience who will join the conversation and respond to questions as needed. Can we pull the slide deck up, please? And go to the next slide, please. So as Ms. Silvestri indicated, our focus today is going to be on reviewing data related to reading by grade 3 and the strategies, interventions that we are using to reach this objective. We're also going to provide an update on our tutoring. As you know, and it has been provided in multiple presentations around our mitigation of learning disruption, one of our priority strategies in mitigation is to implement tutoring. That is one of the 6 strategies that have been outlined. So we're going to provide a more detailed update on where we are at with this intervention today as well. And then we're going to conclude our presentation today by sharing a draft of our brand new strategic planning website. It is not on the website on the official page yet, but we wanted to preview it with the committee and also to share with the committee the next steps that we are engaging in as we continue to monitor and build out the board's strategic plan in a new and innovative way. We structured today's session to provide more time for discussion. So after each section, we look forward to having conversation between the committee and staff so that we can engage together in a deeper understanding of this work. One of the questions that the board has rightfully asked us as we've been engaging in our strategic planning work is, how do we know what we are doing is even working? We hope to engage more in that discussion today and talk about some of the challenges and next steps around the work. When we presented the strategic plan to the board last fall for approval, we said that because this plan was developed during an unprecedented pandemic, we acknowledged that our strategies would need to be fluid. We know that our traditional strategies may not work as we originally planned in an environment that was potentially pre-pandemic. But the process of reviewing impact along the way will allow us to make adjustments as they're needed rather than having to wait to the very end of a whole year cycle. Next slide, please. So before we begin, and I turn it over to the team to present today, I did want to just share with you where this presentation aligns with our strategic plan. So as you can see that this presentation falls in our first strategic priority area of academic excellence and aligns with the objective around improving student achievement in literacy and mathematics. It's also going to align in multiple ways with the key priority strategies that were identified as well. And what I want to stress and reiterate is that although these are three top strategies that we are stating we're implementing to meet this objective, they're not the only strategies that are being used to meet this objective. You're going to hear a lot today about the teaching of foundational skills, and then which aligns with that first strategy. And you're also going to hear information about data. And you're going to specifically hear about grade 2 students from last year and how they're doing so far this year around the measures of academic progress assessment in reading being used as that indicator. Next slide, please. So again, I just want to also highlight for everyone that under this objective of improving literacy in math, these are our metrics of success that we are using to evaluate our year-end progress. And these are our yearly broken out goals for each of these areas. And if you look at like the first one, for example, under percent of students meeting evidence of learning in literacy, we're going to be hearing more about MAP data today. And MAP is one component of the evidence of learning framework. So I just wanted to highlight for everyone here today that under this particular objective, this is our end of year metric as a reminder that we are going to be evaluating. Next slide, please. I am now going to turn it over to Dr. Addison to walk us through the first part of our presentation around reading by grade 3. Dr. Addison?
Thank you, Ms. Sharon. Good afternoon, members of the Strategic Planning Committee. Before I begin with sharing the data, I want to share what measures we use to examine the extent to which students are reading by grade 3. As a reminder, this examination is connected to the October 2019 resolution focused on the district sharing information on reading on grade level by the end of grade 3. These data I will be sharing will show us where current grade 3 students ended grade 2 as it relates to literacy and began their 3rd grade year. For the end of grade 2, the summary, we present results from the MAP Reading Fluency Assessment, which is a measure of foundational skills. For this assessment, we use the grade level expectations espoused by NWEA that fall into the following categories: below expectations, approaching expectations, meeting expectations, and exceeding expectations. For grade 3, we use MAP growth reading as the measure, with those meeting or exceeding the 50th national percentile as our proxy for being on grade level. Next slide, please. On this slide, we are seeing grade 2 results for current grade 3 students. The horizontal bars represent the results for all students and is further disaggregated by various student groups. The right side of the slide represents results for students receiving services. At the end of the 2020-2021 school year, which was mostly instruction provided virtually, 34.8% of students met or exceeded expectations. And examining results by student groups for the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations, you will notice there are higher percentages for students not receiving free and reduced price meal systems or FARMS services compared to their peers who are receiving FARMS services. About 62% of Asian students not receiving FARMS services met or exceeded expectations compared to 25.6% of Asian students receiving FARMS services. 37.7% of Black or African American students not receiving farm services met or exceeded expectations, compared to 24.2% of Black or African American students receiving farm services. For students receiving services on the right-hand side, 15.3% of students receiving special education services met or exceeded the end-of-year expectations. Additionally, 13.2% of students identified as limited English proficient met or exceeded expectations. Next slide, please. On this slide, results are presented showing the percent of current grade 3 students who met the end of year grade 2 expectations on map reading fluency, the green visuals, and the percent of grade 3 students at or above the 50th national percentile on the map reading fall administration, the blue visuals. Again, we use the 50th national percentile as our proxy for students being on grade level. The blue and green dots represent the same cohort of students. Data are, again, disaggregated by students and services. As you look at the slide, you will notice higher percentages of students meeting the grade 3 fall MAP-R expectation. Here again, you will notice higher percentages for students not receiving FARMS services compared to students receiving FARMS services. 82.7% of white students not receiving FARMS services met the MAP-R expectation, compared to 61.4% of white students receiving FARMS services. Additionally, 58.7% of Hispanic Latino students not receiving FARMS services met the MAP-R expectation, compared to 25.7% of Hispanic Latino students receiving FARMS services. Next slide, please. In seeing the results from the previous slide, a question we wondered was, what does the data look like for students who did not meet or exceed expectations at the end of grade 2, but met the fall MAP-R expectation? And if you recall from the previous slide, the blue dots were higher. And so this slide details the information on the close to 6,700 students who didn't meet at the end of grade 2, and whether they were at or above the 50th national percentile on the fall MAP-R. Again, data are organized by student groups and services. Again, you will notice higher percentages for student groups not receiving FARMS services compared to those receiving FARMS services. Next slide, please. After noticing some students who did not meet the grade 2 expectations met grade 3 fall expectations, it was natural to understand how many of those students participated in our summer programming opportunities. Of the close to 6,700 students who did not meet at the end of grade 2, close to 2,700 participated in summer school. This slide details the performance of students who participated in summer school who did not meet grade 2 expectations, but met grade 3 fall expectations. Although not examined for statistical significance here, you will notice some students were able to meet the fall MAP-R expectation of being at or above the 50th national percentile after participating in summer school. 66% of non-farm students in our all other student groups category, which includes 2 or more races, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, and American Indian or Alaska Native student groups, were at or above the 50th national percentile. I will now turn it over to Ms. Malika Brown, supervisor of K-5 elementary curriculum, to share more about our elementary literacy program.
Thank you, Dr. Addison. Good afternoon, members of the committee. As you can see from the data that Dr. Addison shared, we continue to have a high percentage of students not meeting the grade level reading expectations. And unfortunately, this isn't something new. The percent not meeting has increased as a result of the pandemic. However, we've always had groups of students in MCPS, primarily our students in the 5 focus groups, consistently not meeting or exceeding the grade level expectations. This is due to how we've been teaching reading, not only here in Montgomery County, but across the nation. Next slide, please. There's a body of research referred to as the science of reading that tells us how we read, how we learn to read, and how we should be teaching reading. Simply put, to develop skilled readers, there are 2 essential components: decoding or word recognition and language comprehension. In order to achieve reading comprehension, students need to be able to decode words and have an understanding of words. These are two completely different skills, yet both are needed to achieve reading comprehension. This is referred to as a simple view of reading. It is important to note that teachers have been teaching both decoding and language comprehension. However, the way that they are taught and how they've been taught is what's critical. Next slide, please. In MCPS, our approach to teaching children how to read and write is rooted in a balanced literacy instructional approach. Balanced literacy does not allow for explicit and systematic instruction, particularly in those early foundational skills, but also across all of our components of literacy. The research says that in order for children to learn how to read, they need instruction where key skills are directly taught, that follows a planned sequence and connects new learning with prior learning. Unfortunately, our current approach to teaching reading does not allow for this. Furthermore, much of the professional learning teachers have received, particularly over the past 3 years, have been based and heavily on the curriculum and not on how children learn how to read. Additionally, we've also provided limited instruction in foundational skills. Again, one of those key components of learning to read. This was even more so a challenge during virtual learning. This school year, in order to ensure we are truly addressing learning needs, we are beginning to shift our instructional approach from balanced literacy to structured literacy. Structured literacy is a systematic and explicit research-based instructional approach to teaching children how to read in all of the components of reading: phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. Structured literacy instruction is necessary to develop skilled readers. The first step in preparing for the shift to structured literacy has been deepening administrators and our reading specialists their understanding of the science of reading, how to effectively teach reading to students. The elementary English language arts team has also shared a variety of materials with schools to support what they have in their existing foundational skills instruction and increase the different small group strategies. We've primarily been working with using text as guided reading, and we've introduced additional strategies, particularly around using decodable text to support student learning. We've also introduced different assessments that can be used to identify student needs to plan for those targeted small group instruction. This is very different from the work that's been done in the past. Moving forward into the next school year and beyond, the goal is to fully implement a structured literacy approach. In order to make the complete shift, it is essential that teachers have the opportunity to continue to engage in professional learning, particularly in this summer, focusing on the science of reading. Again, how to teach children how to read. It is also important that we have a systematic approach to teaching foundational skills and explicitly teaching all the components of reading, something that we haven't done in the past. We also need to ensure that we have an assessment that diagnoses students' strengths and areas of need. Next slide, please. As the team continues to provide support to schools and reading specialists, there are both strengths and challenges with the implementation. Reading specialists and teachers appreciate the coaching and direct support. We've also been able to provide and have seen the implementation of targeted small group instruction, as well as the use of a variety of texts during instruction. Furthermore, one of the most important strengths in increasing the knowledge of our reading specialists in the science of reading, because they are so instrumental in the shift to structured literacy. Although there are strengths in the implementation and support that we're providing, we're also experiencing a few challenges. At this time, the curriculum resources are limited and do not align with directly teaching and modeling key skills that follow a logical sequence, moving from a simple to complex. Additionally, since we have only had the opportunity to train reading specialists and a cohort of administrators, the current teacher knowledge and practices, they do not align with the science of reading, which is necessary to explicitly teach the components of reading in a structured literacy instructional approach. Next slide, please. In order to address some of these challenges, there are specific budget implications that are important to note. As I shared earlier, we've provided professional learning for a cohort of administrators and reading specialists. And again, this was a necessary step as they are integral in leading the shift in their individual schools. Unfortunately, the learning does not end with administrators and reading specialists. In order to fully make the shift to structured literacy, we also need teachers to deepen their understanding of the science of reading. The goal is to provide all teachers with this professional learning during the summer. As we develop teacher capacity, we also need to ensure that they have the resources and materials that will support their practice. Because the current curriculum does not have adequate resources for teaching foundational skills, particularly in our grades, kindergarten through second grade, it is important that we provide teachers with additional resources that will support the implementation of explicit foundational skills instruction for students. This is needed in all grades, but we are prioritizing our grades K-2 for the upcoming school year. We are moving in a completely different with our instruction. Next slide, please.
All right, so we will open it up to any questions that board members have so far. Ms. Harris and then Dr. Joftis.
Very, very much appreciate this, Ms. Brown. Just as an sort of a 20,000 foot overview, can you share a bit about how we've gotten off track? Because there's been a lot about the curriculum doesn't do this and the training doesn't do that. How did we get here? And what is the most efficient way to get where you need us to be?
That's a fabulous question. So we in MCPS, we're not the only ones that got off track. It's been like this across the nation. Our curriculums are written in a balanced literacy where we're teaching skills that are not necessarily that follow a particular sequence. There's been 40 years worth of research around how children learn how to read, but just hasn't been utilized in curriculum and hasn't been utilized in instructional approach as well. So we're not the last ones to be moving in this directions. There's 18 other states that are kind of moving and seeing what's happening with reading. Part of the reason why it hasn't been alarming, because the way that we've been teaching it does work for groups of students. Between 40 and 60% of the students, this approach works for. They'll learn how to read. You put materials in front of them, you give them some instruction, doesn't have to be explicit, they'll learn how to read. But when we're looking particularly at our students in our focus groups, they need something more. They need explicit instruction. And we haven't always provided that. And again, it's the same thing across, all states. They haven't provided the instruction in the way that students have needed it. And the first part is really around that professional learning. Our teachers aren't graduating from college fully knowing how to explicitly teach reading. They aren't graduating from college with the knowledge of how to do it. And so that puts us in a tricky situation as well, because they're not getting it in college, they're not getting that deep understanding in college, and then they're being put into classrooms, and not being able to do it there. So the professional learning is where we have to start. And then we're going to make it work with our current curriculum. There's things that we can do because based on the knowledge that the teachers will get, they'll know how to explicitly do it. And then we'll be able to add some pieces. The goal is to be able to add some additional pieces so that they have the exact materials that they need.
Just a quick follow-up, and I appreciate all of that. Having fairly recently been a teacher in MCPS, I know there are a lot of trainings and compliance modules that we require our teachers to take part in every year. What are your thoughts about, given the professional development that we need to happen to help our teachers, both current teachers and incoming teachers, really kind of develop that skill set to deliver instruction in the way that will be most beneficial to the most. What is that going to look like from a teacher perspective? What's the amount of professional development you envision, and the amount of how we can structure that into the arc of time of a teacher so that they get it when they need it and they have the time to really embrace it and implement it in their practice without feeling the pressure that so many teachers feel about they have so many things to do all the time.
Absolutely. Ideally, I would love, a week with them this summer, but that's a lot of time. So so the way that it's working now is we're starting with our reading specialists, and they're this school year, they're getting 4 full days of professional learning around the science of reading. And then we also meet with them every other week, and we do some follow-up work with them as well. So we're starting with the reading specialist because, the beauty of it now, we have one in every single school that's really going to help drive this work. Moving into the summer, we have some plans. We have training, a full day training. If I could get some more, I'm going to take it. A full day training for our kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers on the science of reading. And then we have a half a day training for our grades 3 to 5 teachers as well. In addition to those 2 groups, our special education teachers, our ELD teachers, any reading focused teachers, they're also invited to the summer training. But the goal is not to stop there because we don't want it to be a one and done. And so our team is also working on developing some modules that will carry over the course of the school year that really becomes practical. So it's things that teachers can do independently. They can do it during the collaborative planning, or they're designed so that the reading specialist can provide the learning in an ongoing way. And that would happen throughout the school year. So we're going to start with the why this is so important and the difference from what they're currently doing to what they will be doing, and then provide opportunities for them to continue to get that professional learning ongoing. The other thing that we have been able to do, there's a training, it's called Language Essentials for Teachers of for Spelling. And it's 8 units. So 8 full days. And so we're also offering, we can't do it wide scale yet, but we're providing opportunities. All of our reading specialists are taking it, and we're providing opportunities for additional teachers to take it as well. And we're looking to start cohorts just for kindergarten teachers.
Thank you. I really appreciate the candor and the pragmatic approach to how we need to get where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joftis.
Yeah, I want to second Ms. Harris's point. Ms. Brown, really thoughtful. I guess I just want to offer a couple of, I don't know if they're going to be comments or questions or a mixture of the two. I'm just going to list a few things. Love just to get a quick response. And then I don't know if it's worth you and I or others meeting separately. So as you may know, I work with districts all over the country, and I completely agree with your assessment that we are very late, not MCPS, but districts in general are very late to shifting towards the science of reading. I'm currently working with one right now that's basically going through the same process as we are. So completely agree with that. And I'm glad we are taking a very thoughtful and comprehensive approach to that. I do have a couple of comments, questions though. So the first thing is the presentation of the map data is really great. One thing that I encourage districts to do, and maybe we can think about, is to not only look at the sort of aggregate data and the disaggregation by subpopulations, but to do it by school, because what we see is wide variations within those averages by school, and even schools that have comparable levels of farms and students of color in the different categories. You often see some schools that are quote unquote beating the odds and some schools that are very much not beating the odds. And you can almost see that if you draw a correlational line across and sort of see which schools are above and below that line. I think there's a ton to learn from the schools that are above that correlational line, right? And being able to identify what they're doing is, as you know, is super, super important. So that's point one. Point two is I appreciate all the systems and structures we have. We're a big district, and I could hear it in your voice that you would love more time to do the professional learning, et cetera. Districts often fail at these large transitions, not because they don't want to, or not because they don't have really smart people, or not because we don't have good professional learning involved. It's really, I really think it comes down to how are we performance managing that transition, right? So keeping track of not just the data on outcomes, but being able to identify classrooms where, let's say, I'll just take one measure. So percentage of classrooms in a school that are implementing the science of reading as we would like to see them do it, right? And this is not from an accountability standpoint so much as it is from a let's know where we stand and where classrooms we need to provide additional supports. And this may be going on, so apologies if it is, but I think a really systematic approach that's not only tracking the outcomes that we're getting, but also the implementation of the key levers that are driving those outcomes, right? And so knowing that. And then that takes me to the third point about creating networks of teachers and schools where we can share that information together, where we can create sort of just-in-time learning, but also collaborative learning that will enable us to sort of shift that. And then the final point, which I've kind of touched on, is that this is a massive change, and you know that better than I do. And what we know from sort of improvement science is that those don't work very well, right? Because we're asking teachers to take this really big leap. And so what's, I think, going to be really important, and again, you may be doing this already, is to break down sort of on almost a step-by-step process for the teacher. And then really, again, just that performance management of, okay, if we're on, there's these 5 steps of shifting from guided reading to the science of reading, we know that this school, most of the teachers are at step 2. How do we get to step 3, right? So again, it's not an accountability function, but it's being very precise about what the needs are. And if unfortunately, if we don't do those kinds of things, these type of efforts, which are laudable and necessary, aren't going to be successful. So anyway, I'm sorry, that was a lot. But I did want to just sort of share that thinking, and again, it may just make more sense for us to have an offline conversation about some of this. Thanks.
I do want one little piece, because what you said is incredibly important, that I want to mention. We do have 9 schools right now that are piloting this.
Oh, that's great.
Getting a really good sense of what's working, what's not working, so that when we move to scale, we would see where some areas that we need to tweak, where do we need to be a little bit more explicit, where do we need to provide that support. So I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
And just to connect to what Ms. Brown just stated, for those 9 schools, we are working on an evaluation as well to make sure that we're doing that and doing some comparisons for other schools as well.
That's great. But just to emphasize, so great, like we need to evaluate, and I know Ms. Silvestri and I are in strong agreement about the need for sort of program evaluation, et cetera. But without that sort of more micro performance management piece where we're kind of evaluating almost like on a day-to-day basis and providing that formative feedback, that's what it's going to take to move the needle. And this is so critical that, I really want to help make sure that it's done. And I know you guys have sketched out a really beautiful plan. And again, appreciate the candor and the transparency on all this. And just let me know, what I can do to support. Thanks.
Saloni.
Yes, just one quick comment. Ms. Brown, I really appreciated what you said about our students being different kinds of learners, and that meaning we need to take different approaches in terms of how we teach students. But I think in a similar vein, because students are different kinds of learners, it's also important for us to assess them in different ways, right? And I know this presentation was really focused on MAP specifically. And while I understand that that's a very important numerical threshold and way to track students, it's also true that not every student who is able to read and who maybe performs highly in other assessments when assessed in other ways may not be able to perform highly in that way. So just want to make sure that this isn't the only data point that we're using. And we're also, yes, if you could just speak to that, that'd be great.
So MAP is it's part of our evidence of learning. And so that is our external assessment that we use, but there are other measures that we're using to assess how students are reading. Teachers are doing that every day in their classrooms. Whether it's a follow-up question to something that they've heard during a reading, or a part that they participated in the reading. So there are several different formative assessments that are done. There's check-ins that they do. We have assessments that are tied to the curriculum as well, that they engage in. They're weekly, they're units, which are every 3 weeks, and then they're interims, which are 3. We're doing them, they're 4 times, they can happen 4 times during the school year. So MAP is just one, but teachers have several different ways of determining how students are doing in reading and measuring their growth.
It would be great, and this is just a suggestion, I think I've said this before, but maybe if we could pull in some teachers from different parts of our district to speak to that, because I think right now we're really heavily relying on this one quantitative threshold, but I'm afraid that might not be painting the full picture for a lot of our students. So yeah, just something for future meetings. I appreciate you speaking to that though. Thank you.
Thank you. My questions are about the MAP data and with especially the chart, this one with, I don't know if you can see that. I guess I'm trying to understand, I understand the summer school data, but why would the students do significantly better in the fall than the spring? Is it, I mean, this is not addressing summer school. So is this just a more normal testing environment? Can you speak to that?
Ms. Hazel, do you want to speak to that? I see you nodding, so I didn't want to.
Yes, hi, I am nodding because that was our suspicion. Is that when students return back to their schools, back into our normal classroom environments, that we were hopeful that we would see some increase in our test scores for the fall. I just think that level of consistency for the students, having a space where they could really focus and take those assessments, we thought would really be a benefit for the students. So we did see. That's what we believe, but we don't know for sure exactly if that's the reason why, but we did see an increase.
And then what is the story with summer school? So could you just talk me through that slide again to maybe take one group, African Americans, farms. I see here that they did not exceed expectations in grade 2, but they went to summer school, and then 32%. I mean, is that significant to the other chart where we said that we just discussed? Well, I guess my question is, what's the story with summer school?
Sure.
How effective was the prevention strategy?
So this slide is not meant to talk about the effectiveness of summer school. What we were trying to do, however, is create a through line and a connection to what kind of connected to your previous question in terms of you have grade 3 students who met in the fall, but they didn't meet at the end of their second grade year. And so what happened in the middle that may have contributed to it? Part of it is what Ms. Hazel suspected in terms of potentially being in an in-person setting that contributed to that consistency of taking the assessment. The other piece, and this is just an exploratory look for you to say, okay, when we look at those students who did participate in summer school, we do see that there are positive outcomes if we look at it from MAP. However, the statistical significance study and report is in another report completed by our office that we can share with you so that you can see that in terms of the impact of summer school, which was truly focused just on the impact of summer school.
And I believe, Ms. Sharon, we're going to see that in a future strategic planning committee meeting.
Yes, Ms. Silvestri, I think we were talking about doing a deep dive into summer school in our March meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we want to understand that because that's one of our key interventions going forward. Dr. Norton, how does this this new approach of structured literacy intersect with our English language learning supports? I mean, I think you're going to say, you know, good first instruction is good for everybody, but I'm just wondering, is this a good thing? What are your thoughts?
Thank you so much for the question. Yeah, we have started to collaborate around this. Personally, I do believe that explicit language instruction and literacy instruction is going to be very impactful for students. For me, I think it's also important that we ensure that for our students who are learning the language at the same time as learning their literacy, that they're able to just do it in a purposeful, contextualized manner so that they're making meaning of the vocabulary and syntax that they're learning as they're, engaging in some of the more like nuts and bolts of structured literacy. So I think that there is definitely a place to weave the structured literacy and ELD strategies together.
And what's the role of your department in professional learning as this gets rolled out?
Yeah, so as Malika, talked about, ELD teachers will be part of the professional learning that is being offered. And then similarly, like we are working to try to expand our reach this summer so that our professional learning on English language development strategies can also reach general education teachers. So it definitely has to be a partnership so that we can have those common messages. And I think it's, Monday that we're going to meet together, but some of these conversations have already started.
All right. Thank you. I think we can continue.
Okay, good afternoon, committee members. This is Scott Murphy, Director of College and Career Readiness and District-Wide Programs. This next part, if we could bring up the slides, is to provide you with an update on tutoring that is underway across MCPS. As you know, a key strategy in mitigating learning disruption. I did want to say that this is not necessarily a deep dive into grade 3 like the first part of the presentation, but really meant to give you more of a macro view of what is happening with tutoring, some of which is just getting underway now. First of all, we want to explain the 3 primary models of tutoring that are now underway across MCPS. First is what we call high dosage tutoring that supports the current grade level curriculum that's delivered by MCPS staff. I'm going to explain a little bit more about what high dosage means in a minute. The second is evidence-based interventions, which is more intensive, also implemented by MCPS staff. And the third is tutoring that's provided by our external contractors that we've recently contracted with and are now underway throughout the district. Next slide is a different view of these 3 models that provides a little bit more information. When we say high dosage tutoring, what we're really talking about there is intensive tutoring multiple times per week that directly supports the daily classroom instruction aligned to the curriculum. So when you hear us talk about the acceleration of learning and trying to have students be successful in their grade level work right now, this high dosage tutoring multiple times a week for at least an hour is what we mean by high dosage tutoring. It can happen virtual, in person. We use multiple measures that I'll talk about to help identify students, and this can be delivered by either MCPS staff or the external providers that we have now contracted with. The second is evidence-based interventions, and this is for students who are significantly below grade level that need even more. This is where we use evidence-based interventions that you see listed on the screen that are well-known research-based interventions that are used, that are purchased from vendors and are evidence-based, and again, multiple times a week for multiple durations of time for students who are below grade level. This is delivered exclusively by MCPS staff, both during and after the school day. The third is the on-demand, the homework help, the tutoring that's provided by our external contractors that is open to all students, all grade levels, and can serve all courses and all content areas. This is now available to every student in the district, available 24/7 on a flexible schedule, currently virtual, delivered by the external providers. Next slide. When we talk about the high dosage tutoring and interventions and identifying the students with the greatest needs, there are multiple measures that are being used to identify students and refer them to begin this level of support. Those multiple measures can be around attendance and engagement, the evidence of learning measures that you know about with their grades and the external tests and the district tests. Teacher recommendations, just observing what's happening day to day, can be a measure. The assessments we use, as well as students who are already in those research-based interventions. There is no hard and fast criteria that we are centrally saying a student is in or out of high dosage tutoring and interventions. There's multiple measures that our schools are using to identify, refer, and begin services to students. So the first part that I want to get into is the MCPS tutoring being delivered by MCPS staff outside the school day. On the next slide. This got underway in the fall. As you know, we were experiencing some staffing shortages and some challenges as the school year opened. Schools got underway in October and November. This is where we pay MCPS teachers and paraeducators their hourly rate to serve students outside the school day. Based on the impact of the staffing shortages that we've had, there's different levels of staff capacity right now. So there's really some variance across our schools and what the MCPS tutoring is looking like. But as of last week, there are over 1,200 MCPS employees who are tutoring our students outside the school day and serving just over 3,700 students across MCPS. The next slide is a little bit more information on those 3,700 students, those participating in that high dosage intervention across the 3 levels, as well as the evidence-based interventions. And on the right of your screen is the breakdown of those students in student groups and by services. You can see that the demographics of the participation reflect a lot of the diversity of the district and the students in some of our service groups who we are seeking to serve. We again, next slide. There's a lot of credit to our MCPS employees who've stepped forward to provide this level of tutoring outside the school day. On the next slide, it's just a couple of examples of some of the training and support. There are lead tutors, or essentially a site level coordinator that is supporting these efforts at the school level and serves as a liaison between the central office and the school. There's ongoing training and support for those employees that we're offering, and we're working really across our offices with special education, our English learners, our communications and technology systems. All these things need to go hand in hand to make sure we're not only reaching the students that we intend to serve, but also doing it effectively in our communications and our technology and reaching the students that we want. So that's the MCPS side. Next are the external vendors that we've now contracted with. On the next slide. Just a quick review. There was an RFP over the summer. Proposals came in. We evaluated those proposals in the fall, and 2 companies were pre-approved in November. That RFP was all about aligning to our priorities at MCPS, ensuring that the practices and the approaches were culturally relevant and meeting the needs of our students here. Since approval, we've been working every single day on finalizing the contracts, the background checks of the tutors, the technology systems to get this underway. And as of this week, it is underway by these 2 external providers. These providers will both supplement what our schools are doing where they haven't been able to find enough staff, as well as provide that on-demand homework help to any student in the district. We began an early launch in the schools who needed the most help earlier this month, and as of earlier this week, launched district-wide with both companies. Next slide, please. Their initial priorities for these 2 vendors, number 1 is providing those services to those schools that haven't had enough staff. Number 2, the schools who've had some staff but need more to make sure they're able to serve all of their students. And then 3rd, again, this on-demand homework help that's available pretty much in any course and all grade levels, available to all students. I want to highlight that there are multiple languages available with tutoring companies, direct support for English language learners, pretty robust possibilities here that we are just getting underway. Next slide, the outreach and communication around this is obviously very, very important. So we've begun the system-wide announcements and outreach around what is available from these tutoring providers. These have been translated. These are now live on the website and direct communications going from schools and more to come because this is not something that we can let up on and will certainly be a long-term effort over the next 2 years minimum as we go forward. Again, this was meant to provide you a macro sort of overview of what's now underway. When we get to the point where we're ready to evaluate impact, on the next slide is really, again, I think the multiple measures that you're familiar with of our students who are participating in tutoring, whether it's the high dosage, whether it's the on-demand help or the evidence-based interventions, the various measures that we use grounded in the evidence of learning that will not only monitor progress along the way, but monitor our return on investment and impact over a longer period of time. The next slide, all of this currently is being funded by the ESSER grants that are part of the recovery efforts coming down from the federal and state government. Some of this also began last year, what was known as CARES tutoring. Last school year, when we were all virtual, there was a tutoring model that was in place last year. We had one tutoring company that was used this year and now expanding. These grants will go through, these services will at least go through 2024. But we obviously will be monitoring closely how it's going in terms of impact and what we may want to continue beyond this temporary relief funding. So those are the kind of the high level overview of the tutoring efforts that are underway. That concludes this part of the presentation. We can turn it over for discussion and questions.
Any questions? I have some quick ones just to get us started here. You shared the number of students that are currently participating, but what's the gap between the need and what we're able to serve? Or are you satisfied with the external vendors meeting that gap?
We are going to be relying on the partners to eliminate that gap. I can follow up with you on specific numbers, but we have some schools who have been able to fully meet the need. We have another set of schools who are a little bit short and need that supplement. We have some schools who have been unable to really get anything going because they're so shorthanded. I don't have the specific numbers here, but we're confident that the vendors will be able to make up that gap.
And the MCPS staff that are doing the tutoring, is that in person?
It's a combination of virtual and in person. Mostly virtual right now. One of the reasons is transportation. To be able to provide after-school transportation at scale district-wide is a challenge, not to mention our instructional conditions right now and wanting to be able to be flexible with the tutors as well as the students. So there is virtual tutoring that's happening a lot and in person when the conditions allow.
Okay. And what's considered high dosage?
High dosage would be more than once a week, so at least twice, anywhere up to 3 or 4 sessions a week for at least an hour, 60 to 90 minutes.
And then you said about the monitoring of the impact. How often will you, is it a quarterly or is it as it goes? How often will you be checking in on impact?
That's a good question. I can't say we've established a milestone date just yet. I think at the end of the next marking period, certainly the end of the school year will be our first kind of benchmark time, I think, to take a look, particularly at grades, as well as those measures that we have. And then on a schedule after that, that we can establish.
Thank you. I think I saw Ms. Harris had her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Murphy, my first question, high level, trying to really drill down and understand the difference between the high dose tutoring, which you said was targeted to students who really need support to meet daily classroom expectations, and the evidence-based tutoring, which were students who were significantly below grade level. So can you just give a little more explanation as to what the differences in those two groups are? And then you, as Ms. Silvestri asked, what is high dose tutoring? And you said at least, a couple times a week, 60 to 90 minutes at a time. So what is the evidence-based tutoring for the students significantly below grade level? What is that scheduling like?
Great questions. So let me start with the evidence-based interventions, which MCPS has been using for many, many years pre-pandemic for students who are at least 2 grade levels below in reading or math. And there's a portfolio of these research-based interventions that are available and that we purchase, that we provide training, and depending on the intervention, the timing is different. So for one intervention, it might be X number of times per week for X number of hours. The other may be different depending on which one is being used for reading or for math. It's really dependent on that particular provider, that particular intervention that we purchase. The difference between high dosage intervention is it's using the grade level curriculum as the materials for tutoring. So at the elementary level, the Eureka Math would be the foundation of the materials that are being used to help students at grade level. So one of the primary differences is the actual materials being used. And with the interventions, sort of more of a gap of students below grade level that need to have these services.
Can I just add, several years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, when we did some collection of information from schools about interventions, we had well over 50 different types of interventions being used in school, and many not really evidence-based. And so we decided to pull together with our office and special education and really evaluate evidence-based approved interventions approved by MSDE. And we narrowed that list down to a handful in literacy and mathematics and provided training to our schools and also provided them with additional funds to add more paraeducators to their schools and provide them with the materials and the training. So we have Orton Gillingham is a process for teaching and supporting students, but also iReady, really great reading. So those are some of the intervention, evidence-based intervention programs that we have. And as Scott said, depending on the program and depending on the need of the student will determine how long they're in that intervention and when you might stop to assess and then make decisions about where you take them next. So it is certainly more tailored. It's almost like an individual plan for a student if they receive those interventions.
Thank you. And so kind of a follow-up question. It seems like, as you've described these three different, the tutorings, the high dosage, the evidence-based, and the on-demand and the homework help. For the first two, the high dose and the evidence-based, you're relying on the school primarily, and correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, you're primarily relying on the schools to identify students who need that high dose tutoring or who are significantly below grade level and need that support. So if that's incorrect, let me know. And then the follow-up question is, how are we reaching out to families in culturally appropriate ways to let them know when their students would benefit from these services and get the families to buy in to that strategy for their student?
Yeah, so great questions. To the first question about the high dosage tutoring and the interventions, you are correct that schools are identifying those students based on the multiple measures and sort of the considerations that we put out. We have not, like I said, set a hard and fast threshold of who should be in or who should be out. And we also want that the day-to-day that observations that teachers make to be part of the consideration. So then it is the school primarily reaching out to the student, to the family in an ongoing way to connect with them about the opportunities that are here for tutoring. We've provided example letters, translations, strategies for communication, again, ongoing office hours that we have to support those lead tutors in each building. It's a lot with everything that's going on right now. And so we do have, again, there's a lead tutor, a lead teacher in each school that's been identified and is getting additional supplement to be the lead in the building to help coordinate some of those efforts.
I guess the natural follow-on is, how are we tracking those students who our staff are identifying, but whose families aren't necessarily buying into the recommendations of the school for their student to receive that additional help?
That's a work in progress. Right now, we're relying on our schools to track that data. We're in the process of migrating all of this over to Performance Matters, our data system, so that we can see who's been identified, who's being served, who isn't. But as we're building all of this over the course of the last couple of months, we're not quite there yet and being able to grab that data in real time.
And I think I'll let my colleagues pipe in here, but the last question that I think probably all of us have is concerns around, you mentioned the variance and schools that either lack the readiness or the staff availability to support students who need these interventions, and how we are, so we're halfway through the school year at this point, and how we are reaching out to support students in those schools who need the intervention but haven't really been able to receive it as of yet.
Yep, we share that concern, and again are hopeful that the external providers are going to will swing into action very quickly and begin to make up that gap. And again, this is a multi-year effort. So this is going through 2024 minimum. And so, building the foundation and the infrastructure now, hopefully will set the stage to quickly make up that difference.
And I just want to add, we are really focused on the students that are receiving services from us, from the tutoring before or after school. But certainly schools really are tuned into their students, and the ones that they may have a lot of concern about who are not showing up are being very creative about how to serve them during the school day when they arrive, and figuring out through their master schedule how they may be able to provide them additional tutoring or intervention during the day. So we are really monitoring what's happening outside of the school day, but schools are also really supporting students if they are not able to do that before or after school. Many schools are figuring out how to make that happen. And I want to state that because I do think it's an important component to how schools are supporting students.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Ms. Murphy, I'm assuming that the vendors have been fully vetted for working with children, correct?
Yes, it was a pretty extensive evaluation process that we went through. Got references from other districts. Have gone through all of our requirements internally with background checks and so forth. And also we've been meeting with them every single week since November. And I'll give them credit for really getting to know us as a district, what our needs are, where we see the priority needs of our students. And up to this point, they've been very responsive.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we can continue with the presentation.
All right, thank you. Can we put the slide deck up, please? Okay, so for this final part of the presentation, we just kind of wanted to relate this back to the question that the board has been asking and the committee has asked, which is how do we know that what we are doing is working? And that really is the next phase of our strategic planning work with our brand new strategic plan. So I'm going to talk about what some of our next steps are looking like in a moment. But before we do, I did just want to preview that part of developing our FY22 to 25 strategic plan was to kind of revamp the way the public-facing website looked for the district and for the community. So if we could pull up the website, please. Oh, no worries. If we could scroll up to the very top. So what our priorities were when we developed our new the new website for the strategic plan was to make sure that this was the old strategic planning website. There was a lot of scrolling. There was a lot. I mean, you really had to, it was the way it was organized. It was just a lot. So we wanted to make it a very streamlined approach. So as you can see at the top, there are the 3 strategic priority areas. User can click on any of those areas in order to take you directly there. But if you, exactly, thank you. So if we scroll down a little bit, I wanted to make sure that we included the most updated demographic data for our district in a clean format for people to see. And then we just gave a very brief introduction to the strategic plan in alignment with also the graphic that we developed to show the relationship between our core values, the 3 priority areas, and that our ultimate goal is for students to be prepared for college, career, and community. And we also have a link in there to our core values. So if you continue to scroll down, and we'll use the academic excellence as an example. There is a brief, obviously, description of what that means to the district. and to the Board of Education are what academic excellence is. And then you have each of the objectives identified here. And if you click on an objective, and we'll click on the first one, since that's the one that we were looking at today, we have the objective outlined, the priority strategies that we have identified to align to the objective, as well as the metrics of success. When last time we brought this to the Strategic Planning Committee in October, we shared, when we looked at indicators, we shared baseline versus where we wanted to be in 2025. And we knew that there was interest in identifying the annual targets by year. So we built out those annual targets by year, as you can see, for each objective, so that you could easily click through and see what those targets are. And that you can, if you go to increase the percentage of students graduating high school, you click on the next objective, you can see that they're aligned all throughout them. Now, if we go to scroll down to our well-being and family support objective, as noted when we presented our strategic plan in November, if we click on, I think the first one, and scroll down just a bit, okay? This is one example where we have some brand new objectives in our strategic plan, as you all know, that we did not have any baseline data for. So we were unable to set a target for 2024 to 2025. So we are working this year on identifying and creating that baseline data so that we can then build this out. So that is why you'll see some things that say new or are blank. So we know we need to beef this up and build this up. So that is ongoing work that we are doing with all of our offices to make sure that we are collecting the appropriate baseline data that matches with the strategies and the objectives identified in the strategic plan so that can be built out. If we can go back to, and yeah, you can scroll down, and actually if you click on like increase district-wide, yep, the first one, and scroll down. This is another one where we're talking about, at the board table, I believe it was at the work session earlier this week. One of the questions that came up actually in my budget chapter 6, and as well as subsequent chapters was, how are we really evaluating our professional development, right? How do we know that the training that we are giving to teachers is having an actual impact on teaching and learning in the classroom? And that is a really complex question because there's not always a direct through line that you can say this training equals this result. The other thing that we have to think about is frequently when we do professional learning, oftentimes you have to think about a 3-year implementation plan when we're doing new initiatives and how we evaluate that over time to really determine impact. But that doesn't mean that we can't do better at really trying to draw those connections. And that really is the next layer of work for the broader strategic plan. And I just wanted to highlight that in particular, because that was a question that had come up at the budget work session. If we can go back to the slide deck. And we go to the next slide. Thank you. So now that we have our strategic plan that was adopted on November 9th, we've built out annual targets. We also know that we're trying to identify some baseline information. The next layer of work that we're trying to do for our new strategic plan is twofold. The first thing that we're doing, and because we've heard this loud and clear as a priority interest of the Board of Education as well as our community, is working strategically with our budget team, the Office of Shared Accountability, as well as variety of offices to align, to directly show the through line between the budget and the strategic plan to determine how we effectively evaluate our return on investment for our various initiatives and programs that we're implementing. This has been an interest, I think, for multiple years now that has been expressed. And we're really, this is where we're going next with our team. So we actually have some meetings coming up in February to start brainstorming. How do we actually make this a reality? What are some barriers that we have to achieving this right now? And what do we need to do to build out a very clear return on investment process that is aligned with our strategic plan. So that's one phase of work that we're moving into now with the strategic plan. The second phase that we're moving into with our strategic plan, and we just had our first initial meeting yesterday, I believe, is now that we have our objectives, we have our annual targets, which we know are annual targets. So those are what's being measured at the end of the year. How are we creating regular monitoring and reporting on our strategic plan focus areas in all three priority areas on a regular basis? So we started with a cross-office team initially yesterday. We started brainstorming some of the processes and structures that currently exist in the offices to measure their accountability to the different strategies that have been identified in the strategic plan. And now what we're going to do throughout the month of February is dive deeper into what that needs to look like so that we can publicly report to the board and our community progress along the way outside of just once a year, right? Of just getting that information once a year through the annual report. And, Dr. Addison and I, as we've been working on the strategic plan this year, have done a lot of research in what we've seen in other districts. And we actually have not had or seen a lot of really good exemplars for how this regular monitoring occurs. And Dr. Joftis, I don't know if you and your expertise has seen some of this. If so, we would love your expertise in sharing that. But in our preliminary research, we haven't really seen that done with a lot of clarity. So we really want to innovate, though, in Montgomery County so that we're really holding on and sharing and telling our story accurately, not just so people know what's happening, but so that this is really a living, breathing document that we are constantly coming back to, we're reflecting upon, so that we're best meeting the needs of our students, staff, and community as we go forward. So that is some of our ongoing work that we're engaging in right now. So at this point, this concludes our presentation, and I'd like to turn it back over to Ms. Silvestri for any questions.
Questions from board members? Mr. Joftis?
Thanks, Ms. Silvestri. Ms. Sharon, thank you so much. Very thoughtful, very comprehensive. I do have some thoughts that I'd be happy to share with you, probably easier offline. And the thing you'll probably keep hearing me say too is that in order for this change to happen, it's just not enough to wait until we get to the outcome for tracking outcomes, that we really have to have a whole system in place, at least for some really high leverage strategies. I don't think you can do it for all because I recognize it's a lot, but to identify one or two really high leverage strategies and just have indicators of implementation as well, and just track that and have regular feedback sessions with those who are involved, whether it's the principals or the reading specialists or what have you, and say, okay, we're seeing that the science of reading is slow on the uptake. I'm just making something up. What do we need to do to continue and have this constant and continuous improvement process where we're not just waiting for even the MAP data, which I guess is like 3 times a year. So that's my major thing. And then I also have some thoughts I could share offline with you in terms of how to track and report on some of the measure or on the objectives that you are talking about.
Great. Well, we'll definitely be in touch then, because I'm eager to pick your brain, Dr. Joftis.
Yeah, I want to echo the point about picking some high, I don't know what you said, Dr. Joftis, that high leverage indicators and going deep with those rather than trying to do every single indicator in the plan, which I think that's what you're trying to do, but it's a lot. And to be realistic and impactful, I think that makes sense to pick the ones that are going to give us the most impact in student achievement. One thing that when do you think the website will be live?
We can make it live whenever we want. We were actually thinking that a good time to unveil it to the whole board and the community is when, I believe on March 8th, we're coming to the full board to do the annual report. And we thought that for the annual report, that's kind of where we're closing out the old strategic plan. And then kind of we thought we could share that with the board and then make it officially live at that time.
Okay. I think that as we get to that date, I would like to engage with our communications office to develop a campaign so that the community can really understand the plan, and it's our plan as a community, and we all know what we're working towards as a school system.
Great idea.
Ms. Aluni?
Yeah, my comments are sort of a combination and extension of Dr. Joftis and Ms. Silvestre. It's great to have all of this really detailed information publicly accessible for our community, but the vast majority of our community members are not going to want to or understand or have the time to be able to comb through all of it. So if we could maybe work with our communications team to just pick a couple of, I want to say checkpoints, right, along this multi-year plan. Maybe it's at the end of every year or every semester where we can just release a much smaller, low dosage report on where we are. Because at the end of the day, I think everyone in our community has a vested interest and wants to know where we are in tackling learning loss. But throwing all of this data at them can also be really overwhelming, right? So picking a few key indicators and a few key dates as sort of checkpoints, metric points where we reconnect with the community and in a very accessible way, in understandable everyday language and graphics, explaining where we are. In tandem with this very detailed website for people who do want to do a deeper dive.
Thank you, and I also appreciated your addition of the funding that goes with the interventions. I've been advocating about explaining to our public where their tax dollars are going, return on investment for their tax dollars, and so I don't know what that will look like, but I'm thankful that you're running with it, so that we can better communicate the return on investment. All right. So, Ms. Sharon, can you remind us what we're going to cover in our next meeting, just so that as a preview, the summer school data, and then what other key indicators?
Yes, the next key indicator was algebra by 8th grade that we were going to do a deeper dive on. So the next meeting we're going to do a deep dive on that summer school so that we can really better understand as we're about to roll out for our next summer school. And then do a deeper dive on that middle school mathematics and with that focus on that 8th grade algebra component.
Excellent. I want to thank everyone for a great presentation. This is the bread and butter of the work that needs to be done. And so very informative. I might watch it again to process everything, but thank you so much for your work, and we are adjourned.